Welcome back. Great to see everybody. Thank you all for coming. It's great to see the interest is still there. I want to start off by noting that the President got off the phone just a short time ago with Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau to discuss the vicious attack on a Quebec City mosque last night. The President offered his condolences as well as his thoughts and prayers to the victims and their family and to all Canadians. This is another senseless act of violence that cannot be tolerated. The President also pledged to support the Canadian Police and Intelligence Service in any way necessary. Prime Minister Trudeau was extremely appreciative, and he was also cautious to draw conclusions on the motives at this stage of the investigation, and the President shared those thoughts. Canadian law enforcement officials are actively investigating this matter. We condemn this attack in the strongest possible terms. It's a terrible reminder of why we must remain vigilant and why the President is taking steps to be proactive rather than reactive when it comes to our nation's safety and security. We are, of course, praying for those injured in the attack and are keeping in close contact with officials in Quebec and Canada. We're moving into a quick recap of the events of the past few days. As you all know, the President had an extremely busy weekend. He followed up on his first week of action with a weekend of action. On Saturday and Sunday alone, the President spoke with 8 foreign leaders. He signed executive orders delivering on some of the biggest campaign promises that he made to the American people, and he met with staff to continue to plan another busy week. Also over this weekend, we carried out a very successful raid against al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which resulted in the death of an estimated 14 AQAP members and the capture of important intelligence that will better enable us to counter and prevent future terrorist plots. Tragically, during this raid, the life of a brave service member was taken and 4 were wounded. Our thoughts and our prayers are with the family of this fallen American hero, and we also pray for a speedy recovery and complete recovery of those service members who sustained injuries. As a quick recap, on Friday, you saw the President's enthusiastic reception at the Department of Defense for the ceremonial swearing-in of Secretary Mattis as our Secretary of Defense. While at the Pentagon, the President also signed 2 executive actions to protect America from those who wishes to do us harm. This focus on securing our borders and our homeland was obviously a major part of what the President campaigned on, and now he's doing exactly what he told the American people he would do. The President will always put the safety and prosperity of our country first and foremost. We kicked off Saturday by launching the weekly address, which debuted for the first time on Facebook Live. Nearly 11 million people were reached by the address online. Over 1.1 million people engaged with the post via comments, likes, and other interactions. And as of this morning, the video had been viewed almost 5 million times. And just as he did throughout the campaign, this is another example of the President being able to take his message directly to the American people. On Saturday, the President signed 3 executive actions on issues ranging from government ethics to national security. As part of the President's plan to drain the swamp in Washington and return power to the American people, he signed an executive order imposing strict post-employment rules on all federal political appointees, including a 5-year lobbying ban and a lifetime ban for foreign government lobbying, among other restrictions. The President continues to make it very, very clear that if you want to be part of a Trump administration, you're going to be serving the country, not yourself. The President also signed a memorandum modernizing the structure of the National Security Council and the Homeland Security Council. There's been a lot of misreporting this week about what this memo does and does not do. So let me walk you through this real quick. There's 2 issues at hand. One is the makeup of the NSC, and the other is the makeup of the Principals Committee. The Principal Committee is merely the NSC minus the President. The idea is that the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the DNA are being downgraded or removed is utter nonsense. They are at every NSC meeting and are welcome to attend the principals' meetings as well. To be clear, the memo lays out that if there's a principals' meeting that is outside their scope, for example, a domestic issue that doesn't pertain to the military, they're not required but certainly welcome to be in attendance. We recognize that certain homeland security issues may not be military issues, and it would not be in the best interest of the Joint Chiefs' valuable time to be at these meetings. Just yesterday, we called several outlets who were severely misreporting this topic to better inform them about what this memo means. So let me just walk through this real quick. This is the 2001 NSC stand-up memo. This is the 2009 memo. And then this one is I've got the 13 here as well, or the 2017 rather, right here. This is the language that consists of the national security team, the director of the Central Intelligence, and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as statutory advisors to the NSC, shall also attend NSC meetings. That is the identical language in 2017 as it was in 2009 when Obama drafted his. Verbatim, identical. The makeup of the Principals Committee from 2017 is exactly as it was in both 2017 as it was in 2001. 100% identical, except we add the word also. I think it's pretty clear that if you look at all three of these, that's what it does. To be clear, the memo just yesterday, we called that out. Starting with the membership of the NSC, as you can see here, the language that's part of the president's memo is identical to the language from President Bush's 2001. The only thing that's changed in this is the addition of the Director of National Intelligence as a position that didn't exist in 2001. For what it's worth, it's the same as Obama, save for the word also. In terms of the Principals Committee, as you can see from the various language here, and this is, I'll give you 2017 on the Principals Committee. This is the Principals Committee in 2017, and this is the 2001 Principals Committee. It is literally 100% the same. 2001 and 2017 are identical. So this idea that there's been a change or a downgrade is utter nonsense. With respect to the Joint Chiefs in particular, the President holds Chairman Dunford in the highest regard. The suggestion that he would downgrade the important role that the Chairman plays in matters of national security reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the tremendous respect that the President holds for both the Chairman himself and the Joint Chiefs as a whole. For the record, I know someone tweeted out, where was the CIA in this? The CIA hasn't been part of the NSC since the DNI was sworn in for the first time in 2005. That being said, the President has such respect for Director Pompeo and the men and women of the CIA that today the President is announcing that he will amend the memo to add the CIA back into the NSC. So I know that there was a tweet yesterday from the former National Security Advisor that said, where is the CIA out of everything? Well, I'd like to remind the former National Security Advisor that when the memo was drafted in 2009, I don't see the Obama administration including the CIA in theirs. It is President Trump that is including the CIA, not the former administration. So, so just to be clear, when it comes to the CIA, as you know, number one, it wasn't part of the restructuring of the NSC after the DNI was named and sworn in 2005. And we are the administration that's adding it back into the NSC and amending it in. It was the Obama administration that didn't have it in. So to answer the former National Security Advisor's tweet, the CIA is in ours and it wasn't in theirs. With respect to hold on one second. Moving on, the President also signed another memo when he was at the Department of Defense instructing the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the next 30 days to deliver to him a plan to defeat ISIS. This comprehensive strategy and plan must include a recommendation to changes to any rules of engagement and other policy restrictions that exceed the requirements of international law regarding the use of ISIS, public diplomacy, information operations, and cyber strategies to isolate and delegitimize ISIS and its radical Islamist ideology, identification of new coalition partners in the fight against ISIS, and policies to empower coalition partners to fight ISIS and its affiliates, mechanisms to cut off ISIS financial support, including financial transfers, money laundering, oil revenue, human trafficking, the sales of looted art, historical facts, and other revenue sources, and a detailed strategy to robustly fund the plan. This presidential memorandum is a profound statement that the President's clear objective is to defeat and destroy ISIS, and that we're going to do it systematically. This is not only a necessary step for America's national security, it is also a humanitarian imperative. If ISIS is left in power, the threat it poses only grows. We know it has attempted to develop chemical weapons capabilities. it maintains a goal of recruiting homegrown terrorists, and its attacks against our allies and partners continue to mount. The United States must take decisive action, and the President is taking the necessary steps. Over the weekend, the President also held constructive phone calls with the heads of government from Australia, France, Germany, Japan, Russia, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, and the United Arab Emirates. During the calls, the President reaffirmed our partnerships and discussed strengthening our mutual defenses and interests throughout the world. The safety of the American people and the security of American homeland continue to be the President's top priority. His outreach to these leaders is a critical step in turning the page on the failed foreign policies of the past 8 years. Notably, he did all this in the face of extreme obstructionism from Democrats in the Senate, who are holding up 17 of his department or agency leads that require Senate confirmation. In contrast, 10 days into his term, President Obama only had 7 people in these positions awaiting confirmation. President Bush had all but 4 confirmed. If Senate Democrats think that voters are going to be okay with them continuing business as usual, dragging their heels and confirming qualified nominees, they sorely misunderstood the message this November. The truth is, these cabinet members are unbelievably qualified and will all be confirmed by the Senate. And Democrats know this. So it's time to stop playing political games with the core functions of our government. This morning, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative sent 12 letters officially notifying the nations to the Trans-Pacific Partnership that the U.S. has withdrawn from the agreement, the next step in fulfilling the President's campaign promise to get our country out of unacceptable trade deals that don't put America's interests first. The President will continue to negotiate new, better trade agreements that will bring jobs back, increase American wages, and reduce our trade deficit. The White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs has been hard at work making sure that all lines of communication are open at all levels of government throughout the country. As of today, the White House has made contact with all governor's offices in every state and territory, and deeper dive conversations on a range of issues have already taken place with 32 governors or their offices. Outreach efforts have touched 22 of 50 state attorney generals, 32 of 50 states secretaries of state, 16 speakers of the House, the leaders of the 10 largest federally recognized tribes, and the leaders of some of the country's largest counties and municipalities. All have expressed enthusiasm about working with the White House on issues impacting their local communities and families. The Intergovernmental Affairs Office is also preparing for the National Governors Association meeting in Washington at the end of February, at which the President plans to host a dinner. Today, the President started his day with a breakfast and listening session with small business leaders. A list of attendees is available if you're interested. The meeting comes on the heels of similar listening sessions that the President held last week with some of the country's top business and union leaders and frontline workers. He's made it clear in his first week in office through numerous executive actions, meetings, and listening sessions that he's fully committed to fighting on behalf of American workers and small businesses. This morning, the Vice President hosted a breakfast with King Abdullah II of Jordan at the Naval Observatory, and the President expects to greet the King this Thursday at the National Prayer Breakfast. The Vice President thanked the King for his efforts in advancing peace and stability in the Middle East and reaffirmed the United States' commitment to Jordan's security and economic development. The two leaders discussed events in the region, including ways to accelerate the coalition's effort to defeat ISIS and promote a political solution to the Syrian conflict. The Vice President welcomes the King's views on potential changes involving the U.S. Embassy in Israel and reiterated that the United States is at the early stages of this decision-making process. The two leaders also discussed how to best make progress towards a comprehensive agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. The Vice President and King Abdullah agreed on the importance of continuing to strengthen the U.S.-Jordan relationship and pledged to stay in close contact about events in the region. Also this morning, the President signed an executive order reducing regulation and controlling regulatory costs. The order instructs the Director of Office of Management Budget to issue guidelines that for every one new regulation, 2 existing regulations in an agency be eliminated. We're calling it 1 in, 2 out. Additionally, the order states that the cost of all new regulations finalized in fiscal 2017 must be no greater than 0 for each agency. And beginning in 2018, each agency will have an incremental cost cap set by the Director of OMB, beyond which it cannot issue regulations. This executive order is the first step in the President delivering on his promise to slash bureaucratic red tape that is choking our nation's small businesses. Under the president's leadership, the federal government would no longer punish Americans for working and doing business in the United States. Every year, overregulation costs our economy billions of dollars and reduces the wealth of every American household. This executive order will help get the economy back on track and is part of the president's bold plan to create 25 million new American jobs in the next decade. It's worth noting that this order is perhaps the most significant administrative action in the world of regulatory reform since President Reagan created the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs in 1981. Finally, a few administrative notes. I'm pleased to announce that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel will visit the United States on February 15th. Our relationship with the only democracy in the Middle East is crucial to the security of both our nations, and the President looks forward to discussing continued strategic, technological, military, and intelligence cooperation with the Prime Minister. As you know, tomorrow at 8 p.m., the President will announce who he intends to nominate for the Supreme Court. And for a party preaching tolerance, it's interesting to see some Democrats have already come out against this unnamed individual. So with that, I'd be glad to take a few questions.
Sean?
Yeah, Trey.
Sean, over the weekend, President Trump requested that the King of Saudi Arabia join him by supporting safe zones in Syria.
Right.
What type of support does President Trump intend to provide, and when can Syrian civilians expect to receive this support?
Well, I think it came up in several of his calls, and that's an important note that there is such strong agreement with how we address this problem, and you're seeing it from across the spectrum. It's important that we have stability in the region. And I think that the idea that this was an area of mutual discussion and agreement is important to talk when we talk about stability in the region. And so we'll have continued discussions on it. But I think that first step of getting both sides on the first page was a huge step forward. Yeah, Blake.
Thanks, Sean. The president said today in that on-camera session with the business leaders talked about how the market has run up during the last couple of months. I want to ask you a question related to that. Today, coincidentally, happens to be the biggest market drop since October. And one of the uncertainties for investors is that tax reform might not get done this year. So my question to you is, can the administration commit to major tax reform in 2017?
Well, it's a two-way street. And I think that you've seen a commitment from the president to fight on behalf of small businesses. That's what this regulation thing was today. I mean, it really can't underscore how important it is. Since 1981, we haven't seen anything of this magnitude to address the regulatory impact that small businesses face. We're going to continue to work with both houses of Congress, both the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee, to develop a comprehensive tax plan. And I think that there's eagerness on behalf of Congress to do that as well. So that is a very promising thing. But I would also note that when you look not just at the ups and downs of a market, but you look at consumer confidence and a lot of the other market indicators, a Trump presidency brought a lot of confidence back to traders, to investors, more importantly to job creators. And you look at the number of individuals, the small businesses, the large businesses, the automakers, all coming in and saying to the president, I want to be part of your effort, your agenda to make the country better, to grow jobs here, to bring jobs back here. I think it's a positive sign, not just on the ups and downs of one day's market fluctuation, but the overall commitment that businesses have to want to work with this administration to add jobs, to create better jobs, to add benefits, to find out how the president can ease the regulatory burden they face. So it's a holistic process that is being undertaken to unleash the American economy. And it's the approach that he's taking not just in small businesses and large businesses and with union workers, but he's looking at the energy sector. How do we unleash America's natural resources, not just to help us make us more energy independent, but how do we do that to create good-paying jobs in America as well and get that economic boon that can come out of it? April.
Sean, two questions. One, how important is national security information to you? How, you're saying that they're at the table and they can come to the table if they want at some meetings.
No, that's not what I said, just to be clear.
Okay.
I don't think I can underscore this enough. What we're saying is nothing has changed. We've, in fact, added and grown this. The Director of National Intelligence and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs are, by statute, part of the NSC. Full stop. What we've done is made sure that on issues of homeland security and domestic policy, they are always welcome to attend, 100%. However, if the issue is on, pandemic flu or other domestic type natures that don't involve the military, it would be a waste of time to drag the chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff over. If he wants to attend, he's part of the committee, he can come anytime. So to try to talk about downgrading or not take this seriously is a misreading of this. It's really a disservice. And I think that for those people who took the time to read it, they understand that. But I've seen so much misreporting all this weekend about downgrading this individual or upgrading. The language could not be clearer. It is 100% identical. And so any misreading of it otherwise is a spread of misinformation. It's plain and simple.
Okay, so you're saying they're at the table.
No.
But
I'm saying they've always been at the table, and they continue to be, and that he has a tremendous amount of respect for him. And so any reporting otherwise is a misunderstanding of it 100%.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
Okay, they're at the table, but how important are their suggestions or their statements to this administration?
Unbelievable. When you look at Secretary Mattis was in the Oval Office. He was on the phone with CIA Director Pompeo this afternoon or this morning. He values their opinion. I don't think you can express in words how much respect he has, whether it's Chairman Dunford, General Mattis, General Kelly, Director Pompeo. All of these individuals, I think he's shown through deed and action and word how much he cares about them. The first stop he made was to the CIA, because of how much he values the work that they do and the respect that he has for them. So I really don't know how much more he can do to show how much he values them.
And then my second question, my last question.
We're not going anywhere.
When you talk about these 7 countries,
Yeah.
these Muslim majority countries, I'm talking to a former official in the Obama administration from Homeland Security. They're saying that what you're doing is very different from what they did, and it's much more restrictive. What do you say to that?
We're going to put the safety of Americans first. We're not going to wait and react. As I said in the statement, the president's going to be very proactive with protecting this country. We're not going to wait till we get attacked and figure out how we can make sure it doesn't happen again. He's going to do everything in his power to stop every threat that we face in this country and every potential threat. And that's the key point in this. How do we get ahead of threats? How do we keep America ahead of the curve when it comes to people who want to do us harm? And that's what the president's done, is he's made sure that every way possible we get down the path of securing this country, putting America's safety and security first and foremost, bar none. Major Garrett.
Sean, you suggested over the weekend, and so did Stephen Miller, that the action taken on the executive order might have been related to some specific intelligence, that it was necessary to prevent something from happening, and any questions about why certain agencies may not have been as briefed up can be explained in part because it needed to happen right away. Can you?
Well, no, I think just to be clear on that.
What you were trying to get
yeah,
at there?
thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. I think what we're trying to say is you don't know when the next threat's coming. You don't know when the next attack's coming. And so the best you can do is to get ahead of it, because if you wait, you're going to be reacting. And what I think I want to be clear on is the president's not going to wait. He's going to make sure he does everything in his power when he can to protect the homeland and its people. That's it. And so getting ahead of threats is the key. Not waiting till they happen, not saying, hey, once it happens, how do we react to make sure it doesn't happen again? I think what I want to be clear about is that since becoming president, he's continued to take steps through executive order and otherwise to make sure that this country is as safe as it can be and that we're ahead of every threat.
In other words, it was not put in place on the timeline it was put in place and the procedures it was put in place because of specific intelligence that was suggesting something needed to be done.
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay, I just want to make sure on that.
Yes, all I'm saying is that his view in general is not to wait to get ahead of the curve. There wasn't a specific threat. It was saying we have to do this Saturday, Sunday will be, but the point that I'm trying to make is that we don't know when that hour comes. We don't know when that individual crosses into our border to do us harm. And so the idea of waiting when you don't know, could it be that night? Could it be the next day? Could it be the next week? And the president's view is, I'm not going to wait. I'm going to make sure that we protect the homeland and its people as soon as possible with every measure that I can. John Roberts.
Just following up on that a little bit, I've got 2 questions unrelated, so I'll ask the second one after this. Number of legal challenges against this executive order. What's your level of confidence that you will prevail legally, and what's the basis for that level of confidence?
Well, and the most prominent case is the one in the Eastern District of New York, and I think we won't even have to prevail in that case. It doesn't make any sense. It deals with people who are being deported. The action never spoke to it, never intended to deport people. It had to do with how do we process people in and detain them until we ascertain whether or not they sought to do us any harm. And again, remember, we're talking about a universe of 109 people. There were 325,000 people that came into this country over a 24-hour period from another country. 109 of them were stopped for additional screening. We've got to keep this in proportion, folks. This is 109 people being stopped out of 325 over a 24-hour period. And I know that everyone likes to get where they want to get to as quick as possible. And I think the government did a phenomenal job of making sure that we processed people through, but we did so knowing so that the people who are coming in hadn't done anything that was seeking to do us harm. That's it, plain and simple. And I think that's an important thing to note, that when you actually look at the perspective of what's going on, and you note the polls that were going up this morning, you know, majority of Americans agree with the president. They recognize that the steps that he's taken were to keep this country safe and to make sure that we didn't look back and say, I wish we had done the following.
But Judge Donnelly's order is just one of a number.
There's four, I believe, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think any of the others are pertaining. All of the enforcement and action regarding the executive order is in place, and it still remains right now. And we feel pretty confident that if there's any problems, we'll prevail. It is, again, this is a national security issue. These 7 countries were derived from what the Obama administration had deemed as needing further travel restriction. We followed through on that, and as we continue to go through this 90-day process review, we're going to make sure that we put a system in place that vets, extreme vets, these people who are coming into our country that potentially could do us harm. Plain and simple. John Gizzi.
So second question.
I'm sorry, I forgot. John said
You
two.
can't forget things like that.
I try.
What's the president's response to Iran flagrantly thumbing its nose at the UN Security Council?
We're aware of.
Order, and if I could just finish, Prime Minister Netanyahu, who you mentioned will be coming here on the 15th, is looking to the White House for more sanctions against Iran.
And I think we're looking into that. We're aware that Iran fired that missile. We're looking into the exact nature of it, and I'll try to have more for you later.
Thank you, Sean.
So, you're right. John Gizzi.
Thank you very much. 2 brief questions. First, the president of ZOA, Zionists of America, put out a statement following the president's proclamation on the Holocaust, saying that the omission of Jews and what they experienced was, quote, painful, unquote. Is the president aware of some of the criticism from the American Jewish community, and does he plan to do anything about it?
Well, I think he's aware of what people have been saying, but I think by and large he's been praised for it. I think the president recognized the tremendous loss of life that came from the Holocaust, but I think with respect to Israel and the Jewish people specifically, there's been no better friend than Donald Trump when it comes to protecting Israel, building a better friendship with Israel. You look at what Prime Minister Netanyahu's talked about. He welcomes this administration. He appreciates the friendship and respect that he has shown to Israel and to the Jewish people. But to suggest otherwise, John, I frankly got to be honest. I mean, the president went out of his way to recognize the Holocaust and the suffering that went through it and the people that were affected by it and the loss of life, and to make sure that America never forgets what so many people went through, whether they were Jews or gypsies, gays, disability, I mean, priests. And I get it, but at the end of the day, I don't think when you look at the state of Israel or the Jewish people themselves, I think there's been no better friend to Donald Trump, especially after the last 8 years. The tremendous respect that he's shown Israel, the Jewish people, and to suggest anything otherwise is frankly a little disappointing.
My other question,
I'm sorry. Okay.
second question.
We're getting way too into the second question.
Thank you. Several NGOs that have helped people from the countries affected have said they specifically have focused on people who interpreted for our military.
Right.
And say they would be affected by this. I believe Secretary Mattis said he hoped to specify that to give these people a better shot at it. Is there going to be any change?
Well, you look at that one interpreter yesterday, came back, he was interviewed on television and said, I love Donald Trump. I think we recognize that people who have served this country, we should make sure that in those cases they're helped out. But that doesn't mean that we just give them a pass. The Obama administration, I think it was 2009, let 2 people through the Iraqi program in. Those people came to the United States and tried to plan an attack in Kentucky. I think that we've got to recognize that people who have helped this country, have served this nation, might not be citizens at the time, want to come here, that we need to appreciate the service that they've had. That doesn't mean that we don't let them in without a certain degree of vetting. And I think that's what we're going to do to make sure, again, that the onus is on us to make sure that we're protecting the American people, and that people who want to come into this country do so in a peaceful way. Margaret, sorry.
In a departure, I'd like to ask you about Dodd-Frank. President Trump said this morning he's going to do a big number on Dodd-Frank, and I wanted to know what's the time frame for the big number? Is this legislation that you're looking at teaming up with Republican lawmakers on, or do you think that the big number can mostly be handled through an executive?
I think we're continuing to work with the Legislative Affairs team on that. I think today what you saw was the first step down the path of regulatory relief to our nation's small and large businesses as well. And I think that he understands, especially as a businessman himself and someone who's been involved in financing, the impact that Dodd-Frank has had on lending in particular, and the impact that it has on small and large businesses. So I think we're going to continue to work with Congress on reform. And we'll have more for you on that at some point in the future. Zeke, I'm sorry. Okay, we're doing 2 for a day.
Oh, that's great. Okay. I'm wondering, do you expect an EO on H-1Bs as part of all this coming anytime soon? And also, I just wanted you to be aware that President Obama, through his spokesman, has now issued a statement on the executive order.
Okay, thank you. I think with respect to H-1Bs and other visa, it's part of a larger immigration reform effort that the president will continue to talk about through executive order and through working with Congress. But you've already seen a lot of action on immigration, and I think whether it's that or the spousal visas or other type of visas, I think there's an overall need to look at all of these programs, and you'll see both through executive action and through comprehensive legislative measures a way to address immigration as a whole and the visa program. Zeke.
Since we're doing 2, I got 2 for you. On the NSC reorganization, with regards to the president's chief strategist being on the NSC, that wasn't something that existed certainly in President Obama's tenure. Can you talk to what does that speak about Mr. Bannon's role within the White House, within the policy decision-making structure?
Well, let's be honest. I mean, David Axelrod walked in and out of NSC meetings quite frequently, by his own account and by several of your accounts. What this shows is that this administration is being rather transparent, that it's putting on the people out in the public who's going to be going in and out of those meetings, not just letting people go in willy-nilly. I think it shows that this administration is trying to make sure that we don't hide things and wait for them to count after the fact. So it recognizes the role that he's going to play. But Steve's not going to be in every meeting. Like Axelrod, he'll come in and out when needed. But I think we wanted to be upfront about it and make sure that was stated so it wasn't a story when he did. Yeah. I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, sorry. Just on the Yemen strike from over the weekend, can you talk a little bit about the president's personal involvement? I mean, this seems to be the first sort of major order he's given. And separately, does he intend to speak with the family of the fallen service member?
Thanks. He was, obviously aware of the strike occurring. He was kept in constant contact Saturday night of the status of the mission, both the success that it had and the tragic loss of life that occurred to that member. We are currently following Department of Defense next of kin procedures, and as soon as it is appropriate, the president will be speaking with the family members. Yes.
Thank you very much. On North Korea ICBM, the North Korea announced that if the United States intercept ICBM, it would be the war. How did you respond on this?
How did we what?
How did you respond to North Korean? It would be the war if you intercept the North Korean's ICBM launch.
I'm sorry. How did
How do you respond?
How did we respond to North Korea? We're working through diplomatic channels on that. I don't have any further readout on that.
One more. Okay. And yesterday, Secretary, President Trump called with acting President Hwang Yong-won of South Korea. And also they said that U.S. and South Korea agreed to strengthen joint defense
Right.
capabilities. What is the particularly
Well, they spoke last night about 7 o'clock. There was a readout provided to that call, and I think we'll have further steps to announce in follow-up to that call, but I think the readout speaks for itself. Mike?
I want to ask about the Supreme Court pick.
Yeah.
Can you talk about why he's moved that pick up to tomorrow night? It sounds like. Can you tell us who the pick is? Is the pick off the list he's been using? Is he 100% sure this is the pick?
He is 100% sure he's the pick. This individual is part of the list that he put out. He maintains exactly what he said he was going to do. But I'm not going to share any further guidance on that. But I appreciate the try.
When you said he, Sean, when you said he's,
I said the individual.
you also said he. You said he's the what?
Sean,
Yeah.
just following up on the president's comments last week that 3 million illegal immigrants voted in the election. You guys said that he would have an executive order on this subject. Is he still planning to do
Yes.
that, or has he changed his mind?
He still has planning to do that.
And then just a second follow-up on your statement about the Holocaust statement. Last night, the Republican Jewish Coalition called it an unfortunate omission that the White House did not acknowledge the Jewish people or
They weren't in
anti-Semitism
President Bush's
explicitly.
acknowledgement either.
It was, President Bush did mention anti-Semitism, so
Look, I think this is-
explain why you decided to depart from bipartisan tradition of two presidents?
It's not. The statement was written with the help of an individual who's both Jewish and the descendants of Holocaust survivors. To suggest that remembering the Holocaust and acknowledging all of the people, Jewish, gypsies, priests, disabled, gays, and lesbians, I mean, is frank. It is pathetic that people are picking on a statement. I remember we issued a statement at Christmas time calling Christ the King, and many of the reporters that are in this room and otherwise started wondering whether we're referring to the King as the president-elect. Do you know how offensive that was to Christians? I mean, the idea that you're nitpicking a statement that sought to remember this tragic event that occurred and the people who died in it is just ridiculous. I think he acknowledged the suffering that existed and wants to make sure that it's enshrined in the American people's memory so that something like this never, ever happens again. And I think to sit there and suggest that he was trying to single out anything, and a people of which he has shown such tremendous respect for, and such a willingness in terms of the state of Israel to go out there and show the partnership that needs to exist between us and respect. And when you contrast that, frankly, a statement, and you look at the actions of the last administration, the Iran nuclear deal, them giving Palestine an equal footing in terms of the amendment that was passed to the UN Security Council on their way out the door, to compare a statement that remembers the Holocaust with the actions of the last 8 years and the disrespect that was shown to Israel is unbelievable. Where were the questions about the UN Security Council resolution that came forward and the idea of this unprecedented step that the outgoing administration took as a massive slap in the face of Israel? Where were the questions then?
So Jared Kushner wrote the statement.
No, I didn't.
Sean?
Did I say that? No.
You mentioned that.
I know what I said. I didn't say Jared's name.
So it was
No,
not
I'm not. But I'm just saying. No, I'm not getting into who wrote it. But he has several members of the Jewish faith on his senior staff, and to suggest that it was an omission of anything else is kind of ridiculous. Yeah.
Sean, there's I think, I'm sure you're aware, there's a dissent cable that's being circulated inside the State Department,
Right.
and takes issue with the executive order. Are you aware of it? What's your reaction to it? And are you concerned that you are facing a bureaucracy at the State Department that may not be working in the same direction you are? And since it is two for Monday. The second thing is, if I could press you a little bit on the very first question you were asked on safe zones. President Trump said a couple of times before the election that he wanted Persian Gulf countries not only to be open to this, but to support it, to pay for it. Is that the request he made of the King of Saudi Arabia in the phone call over the weekend?
So on the first part, dealt with the dissent cable. Yes, we're aware of that. This is a procedure that is part of the State Department's way of letting career officials, career Foreign Service officers express themselves. Obviously, we're aware of it. But I think that any government official or anyone who doesn't understand the president's goal in this and what this actually was. Again, I think this has been blown way out of proportion and exaggerated. Again, you talk about in a 24-hour period, 325,000 people from other countries flew in through our airports, and we're talking about 109 people from 7 countries that the Obama administration identified. And these career bureaucrats have a problem with it. I think that they should either get with the program or they can go. Hold on. This is about the safety of America. And there's a reason that the majority of Americans agree with the president. It's because they understand that that's his #1 priority. And it's his #1 duty, as it should be with any leader, to keep our people and our institutions safe from attack. And that these steps are, frankly, common sense steps that the president's taking to make sure that we're never looking in the rearview mirror saying we should have done something like this. And then
On the safe zone, so
on
he
the
asked
safe
him to
zones.
pay for this.
He did have a conversation about financing with them as well, yes. Yeah, Cecilia, oh, sorry. Cecilia.
Thank you, Sean. President Obama, this statement that was just referenced earlier, said that he's heartened by the level of engagement taking place in communities around the country. Does President Trump have a message for the protesters, and does he have a message for the 109 people that you just mentioned? And since it's 2 for Monday, on this memo about the plan to defeat ISIS, the president campaigned and said that he had a plan to defeat ISIS. Does he?
Yes, he does, and he's talking to his generals to make sure that they provide him the feedback necessary to implement it. That is an ongoing conversation that he continues to have with both the Joint Chiefs, Secretary of State, designee, the Homeland Security Secretary, and the Secretary of Defense. But he has been having that conversation within his National Security Council, within his advisors, to make sure that he has that. He has tasked the Joint Chiefs with a plan to come up with and implement some of his recommendations and some of theirs to make sure that we can defeat ISIS.
And on the message, please, to the protesters and specifically to the families who this weekend were caught up in this.
Yeah, and I think that it's a shame that people were inconvenienced, obviously, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a couple hours. I would rather, I'm sorry that some folks may have had to wait a little while, but I think the president would much rather know that he's not placing a call to someone who was killed because of someone was let in this country to commit a terrorist act. So if you weigh the calls that we have to have, someone being temporarily inconvenienced coming into an airport, and I think when you do talk to some of those people, as I mentioned, a couple of them were interviewed and said, we understand that the president was doing this in the best interest of the country. Look, coming into this country is still a privilege. We're the greatest country on earth. And being able to come to America is a privilege, not a right. And it is our duty, and it is the president's goal to make sure that everybody who comes into this country, to the best of our ability, is here because they want to enjoy this country and come in peacefully. And so he takes that obligation extremely seriously. And so, hold on, I'm just going to finish Cecilia's question since she's so good on the second one. That to make sure that somebody is inconvenienced a little. And people experience this all the time, sometimes going in and out of TSA. We have to wait in lines too. But we do so to make sure that we're getting on a plane, to make sure that we're going to a destination, not committing a nefarious act. I think that the safety of our country, the safety of our people, is always going to be at the forefront of this president's head. And this is where he wants to go. And so, again, I think that we've got to keep all of this into proportion. We had 109 people that were temporarily detained. They're all in. But they were temporarily detained to make sure that the safety of the other 324 million Americans was put first. I don't see how that's a big problem.
Follow up on the extreme vetting. Advocacy groups are saying that we already have extreme vetting. It takes anywhere to 18 to 24 months for people who are applying for asylum or refugee status to go through that vetting process. So how do you justify making it even more extreme? And also, do you plan to add more countries to the list since some of the 9/11 terrorists?
Yeah, it's a 90-day review period. And if you've got other countries, please let us know. I understand that. It's interesting, though, that you're talking about adding countries when I keep hearing all these questions about was it too much and too quick. I mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't argue that we should add more countries, and yet you didn't we're having all these issues with the first.
Is that some of the countries that have problems with terrorism are not in the list.
Right, and we're reviewing the entire process over this period of time to make sure that we do this right. But I don't think you have to look any further than the families of the Boston Marathon, in Atlanta, in San Bernardino, to ask if we can go further. There's obviously steps that we can and should be taking, and I think the president is going to continue to do what he can to make sure that this country is as safe as possible.
What about vetting process?
Last night we were told by senior administration officials that top immigration staffers on Capitol Hill and other offices were involved in drafting the executive order. That doesn't jive with the reporting that we're hearing from offices that they weren't involved. So can you say which offices?
So you're talking offices that weren't involved, but
we're talking to many offices on Capitol Hill who
so
say
there's 535 offices plus territories.
Well, my question for you is which
I'm not under
were
an
involved?
obligation just because you called one of 535 offices to tell you which ones we talked to. As was told to you last night, there were staff from appropriate committees and leadership offices that were involved. Yeah.
Sean, thank you.
Go out.
Thank you very much. Sean, two questions, please. One, on behalf of the Indian American community, they are thanking President Trump for the cabinet level post of Ambassador Nikki Haley.
Right.
Question is that under President Trump administration, you think India will be the member of the UN Security Council, and what changes you think we can see at the United Nations?
Well, obviously the president's very pleased with Ambassador Haley being confirmed and spending her first week up there in New York. She's going to do a fine job representing us, and I'm not going to get any further with respect to seats on the Security Council.
And second, my question.
Of course.
Thank you, sir. As far as President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, they spoke 3 times since President Trump's victory to make America great again. My question is, both leaders, I understand, are on the same boat because thinkings are same. What my question that how both will work as far as U.S.-India relations are concerned, and India is waiting to welcome President Trump.
Well, I appreciate that. They had a great conversation the other day, and the relationship between the two countries has continued to grow stronger in this country. Yes?
Thanks,
Yes.
Shannon.
Yeah.
First one to follow up on Zeke's question. My understanding is the wheels were already in motion on this raid over the weekend, but did the president specifically have to okay it?
He did. Yes,
Okay.
he okayed it.
And then there's a report in the Independent in the UK that the president plans to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement within days. Can you confirm that or
I
shed any
don't
light
have
on it?
anything for you on that. I'll get back to you. Yeah.
Yes, I have 2 on immigration.
Okay.
2 on immigration. The first one is that the president always says he's a great counterpuncher, but he attacked Senator Schumer this morning over fake tears. He said it was 95% basically that he had shed fake tears over the weekend. But Senator Schumer did not attack President Trump. He went after his policy. Was this gracious of the president?
Look, I think the president's tweet speaks very clearly for itself. He knows what he's taught. He understands. Senator Schumer, I think Kellyanne pointed out this morning, you know, where's Senator Schumer's tears been for all the other problems that are going on in this country, for the homeless, for the people throughout New York that are starving for jobs? It's interesting that in 8 years, with all the stuff that's going on in this country in terms of crime and the economy, I haven't seen too many tears come from Senator Schumer. So, you know,
And then my other question is, you said it's been 109 people.
Yeah.
But the Associated Press is reporting that the congressionally approved program by which 300 Iranian Christians, Jews, and Baha'is who are at threat of persecution in that country were coming to Austria as a way station to come to the United States have been blocked from coming to Austria.
Right. So 109 were detained in the U.S.
But that's
temporarily.
another 300 who have been blocked from coming.
Okay.
So that's 409.
No. That's not what I said.
So I'm
I said there were
saying there's an
109 people
additional
detained. Hold on,
300
let me answer
people.
the question. There were 109 people detained in the United States. They were processed through in a way to make sure that they weren't causing anyone in the United States harm. They were processed right through the system just as were. That's what I said. That's exactly what happened. Scott.
Yeah, Sean, what's your level of concern about any kickback from some of these countries that are on that list of 7 as far as how relations may work in the future? And some people obviously are critical of the fact you have countries like, for example, mentioned Saudi Arabia or Afghanistan, where we have had attacks on U.S. soil with connections to those countries. So do you foresee those being added?
So are you asking what is our concern with their reaction to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, I think the president's number one goal is the protection and safety of the United States and its people. If they want to act in a way that's inconsistent with their concerns, then that's up to them to do as a sovereign nation. But it is our duty, and it is his duty, to make sure that this country and its people are protected first and foremost. Yes, sir.
Sean, the LGBT group, the Human Rights Campaign, has issued a statement saying that, citing rumors that President Trump is about to sign a religious freedom executive order that would undermine LGBT rights. Is the president considering any kind of religious freedom order?
I'm going to get ahead of the executive orders that we may or may not issue. There's a lot of executive orders, a lot of things that the president has talked about and will continue to fulfill, but we have nothing on that front now.
So denying it, then, it's not true.
Any chance of the 90-day ban being extended indefinitely?
Right now, it is what it is. The executive order calls for 90 days to review the 7 countries. And again, at the end of that, we'll see where we go from there. But for right now, that's the goal of this.
And then on the Supreme Court, I don't believe you answered this question earlier. What was the reason that President Trump decided to move up his announcement from Thursday night to tomorrow night?
Because he wanted to.
Was it a way? I mean, was
no.
This is flip the script here.
He wanted to move it up. He was ready to go. He made his, as he mentioned on Friday, he was making his decision. He made the decision, and the president chose to go with it. It's plain and simple. There's really nothing more. Daniel.
The New York Immigration Coalition claims that a Syrian refugee with a visa was among the detainees released from custody at JFK Airport. Why was that individual allowed to enter the country? And was it a violation of President Trump's?
I think every individual that's gone through the process has gone through vetting to make sure that they don't pose a threat to this country. So the individual must have gone through the system. I mean, it's pretty plain and simple.
But I thought you...
Yeah.
The daily briefings were not on the president's schedule Tuesday, Wednesday, or Friday of last week.
Yeah.
It's not on there today either. Can you confirm that he has not received the daily briefing on this
No,
day?
he gets it every day.
He gets it. Who does he get it from?
I get it. He gets it every day. I just answered the question. Kristen.
Sean, thanks. Jihadist groups celebrated news of the travel ban over the weekend, indicating that they see it as a recruiting tool. Former CIA and NSA Director Michael Hayden said that he believes this travel ban could make the U.S. less safe. So what do you say to those who argue this travel ban will make the country less safe?
Again, let's go back and look at what it is. 7 countries that the Obama administration had already identified needed further travel restrictions.
They did that you were banned.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is that the president recognizes that it is his duty and obligation to make sure that we keep this country safe, and that and by instituting a process by which we look at these countries over a 90-day period, and the process by which people can come in and out of this country to ensure the safety of each and every one of us, I think is something that makes a heck of a lot of sense. So I understand, and I think in a lot of cases, and I say this respectfully, that I think some people have not read what exactly the order says and are reading it through misguided media reports. I mean, that's when you actually read the report and understand the nexus of it and how it's working. And again, look at how it worked. When you talk about the 325,000 people, 109 were temporarily inconvenienced for the safety of us all.
From Iran for 5 hours.
And they were processed through, Kristen. That's the process. I get the point is that you can go through and nitpick and say, okay, well, this individual is, but that's why we slow it down a little, and to make sure that if they are a 5-year-old, that maybe they're with their parents and they don't pose a threat. But to assume that just because of someone's age or gender or whatever, that they don't pose a threat would be misguided and wrong.
Let me just ask you about the rollout as well. Did Secretary Kelly find out about the executive order as it was being signed, and did Secretary Mattis find out only hours earlier?
Look, what I'm going to tell you is what has been briefed out previously, which is that all appropriate agencies and individuals that needed to be part of the process were. Everybody was kept in the loop at the level necessary to make sure that we rolled it out properly. Vivian.
Respond to the former president?
On that note, and how well were those departments briefed? I mean, you just said yourself that the president is willing to act very quickly when he has to keep the country safe. And so is there a lesson to be learned from what happened last week in terms of maybe better preparing the departments that are relevant?
Well, again, right. I understand the question that you're asking, but there's 2 things that have to get cleared up. One is if we announced this a lot earlier, it would have given people plenty of time to flood into the country who could have done us harm. That's not exactly a sound strategy, right? So the people that needed to be kept in the loop were kept in the loop. The people that needed to be briefed were. And if you, again, I think that this is largely overblown. When you look at the context of how big this was and the number of people that got caught up, it's relatively minor as a percentage of the overall total. So when you look at how this worked on a Saturday, 109 people out of 325,000 were slowed down going in. I truly believe that it is being blown out of proportion, the extent to which this actually was, and for what it did. And I think, frankly, government functioned very well. We made sure that the people coming in weren't coming in to do us harm. We made sure that the people who said that they went back to a country that was one of those 7 did so without any intent to do this country or our people harm, and they all got in after the screening. The system actually worked really well. I mean, that's the takeaway from this, that the system worked well, the country is safer for it.
Sean, do you want to respond to the former president?
Can you answer how many, I know you said 109 over the last 24 hours, since the executive order. How many went through since that 24 hours, have been detained for a number of hours?
Yeah, I don't, to my knowledge, I can try to get you that number. I don't believe it's many. The idea was those were the folks that were basically caught in transit when the executive order was issued. Then it becomes a prospective thing that they're applying through their country. So, again, it almost should be a minimal amount, if any, because that primary initial wave were the people that were in transit when the executive order was executed. The rest of them weren't allowed to actually enter back and are going through the process through the consulate and regular system. So it is actually a pretty easy way of ensuring that the system worked well. Yeah.
Just to clean up something you said earlier in the briefing, you said with respect to the career diplomats at the State Department who disagree and are signing this cable that they should get with the program or they can go. Are you suggesting they should resign their post?
Well, I'm just saying that the president has a very clear vision. He's been clear on it since the campaign. He's been clear on it since taking office, that he's going to put the safety of this country first. He's going to implement things that are in the best interest of protecting this country prospectively, not reactively. And if somebody has a problem with that agenda, then they should then that does call into question whether or not they should continue in that post or not. But the president was elected, and I think, again, look at the polls that have come out so far. The American people support what the president's doing. Everyone in here needs to get out of Washington once in a while and go talk to people throughout America that are pleased that this president is taking the steps necessary to protect this country. And so I do look. I know the president appreciates the people who serve this nation and the public servants. But at some point, if they have a big problem with the policies that he's instituting to keep the country safe, then that's up to them to question whether or not they want to stay or not. But I do think that, again, you got to remember the goal of what the president's doing. David Brody.
So what's the president's message, Sean, to Senate Democrats who have clearly signaled their intention to filibuster his Supreme Court nominee? What is the president's thinking?
It's not just the president's message. I think the American people's message. They want change. They wanted bold, decisive leadership. That's what they voted for in Donald Trump in November. And I think for Senate Democrats to look at this opportunity after the election to slow walk and play political games with these people who are unbelievably qualified to lead the candidates, or the choice that they've made before. I mean, think about this. He met with a bunch of Senate Democrats to talk about the qualities they want in a judge. And before they've even heard who this individual is, you've got some of them saying absolutely no. I mean, that just shows you that it's all about politics. It's not about qualification. The president has a right to have his nominees taken up. That is part of, and so for them, it is going, the default used to be unless qualified, confirmed. And it is now going to always no. And I think that's a pretty sad message, not just what they heard from the president, but I think that they heard loud and clear from the American people. And especially if you think of where the Democratic Party has gone in the last 8 years. They've lost seats at every level. They were supposed to take back the Senate. They didn't. The Republicans did very well in the House. We won the presidency. The president won 9 of 13 battleground states, 33 states overall, 2,600 counties. The message came through loud and clear that the American people wanted decisive leadership. They're getting it. I think if you're a Senate Democrat, you've got to wonder whether or not you're getting outside of Washington enough. Thank you guys very much. I'll see you tomorrow.
Respond to President Obama.
President Obama?